Hey guys, welcome to the BP, the Bible Perspective. We're going to continue in our subject as Christians should be having better sex than porn stars. Now, before we continue, please hit like and subscribe. Like the video, hit subscribe to the YouTube channel, and for you Facebook viewers, hit like the video. All right, so remember this question. The subject came from a question that some young people were asking. Is it okay to watch pornography between a man and his wife? And the issue was, if I watch pornography, maybe I can learn something. Maybe we can spice up our marriage. We can try the different positions and try the different acts that they're performing. So my response is, pornography is fake. Pornography is an illusion. Pornography is acting. What you see on the screen is a performance. When the director says action, they act. They moan, they groan, they try different positions and stuff, you know. And when he says cut, they stop. Their faces go blank. So the idea is that if you, in your mind, think that if I try that, and the reason why you are inspired to try that is because you think it's going to elicit the kind of response, the moaning, the groaning, the pleasure that you see on the screen, remember, they're acting. And what God has given you as a Christian in your relationship, in your marriage, is far better than what pornography can offer you. And so remember, God created marriage, and he created marriage so that between a man and his wife, they are free to explore their sexuality. They are free to open up fully to one another. Body, soul, mind, emotions, desires. And the way it should be is that you are free to give yourself to one another. Now we're going to come back around to that. But what went wrong? In the last video, we talked about fornication. When Adam sinned, he cut man off from God. The reason why that's important to understand is because from that moment, man began to live by his passions. And those passions aren't governed. They're not controlled. And what happens is that man becomes a slave of his body. Remember, your body is a mechanism through the 5 physical senses. Your sight, your hearing, your taste, your touch, your smell. You contact the physical world around you. Now what happens is that through those senses, your passions are stirred up. Your body, the passions, the emotions are stirred up. And without the God factor, man sunk deep into trying to gratify those passions. Of course, sin was the driving force. So we defined fornication last time. So there's 2 ways of defining fornication. I gave a definition based upon biblical principles, of course. There is a textbook definition, biblical textbook. Fornication is all unlawful sexual activity. Unlawful in the context of biblical rule. God says sex is to be enjoyed between a man and his wife. So any sexual activity outside of that union is fornication. Fornication can be all but not limited to, including but not limited to, extramarital sex, premarital sex, homosexuality, bestiality, necrophilia, sex with the dead, masturbation. Now, why all of those? Because, remember, I gave a definition that fornication is the selfish, self-centered use of a person, place, or thing for one's own gratification. So whenever you involve fornication, so now you go back to the depravity of necrophilia, using a dead body to gratify itself. Well, in the same way, people use their hand, masturbation, to gratify themselves. Well, adultery, where a man goes outside of his marriage, or a wife goes outside of their marriage to what? Gratify themselves. Premarital sex, or sex before marriage, when a person just sleeps around with different people to what? Gratify themselves. You may ask the question now, why doesn't God allow us to freely explore our sexuality? How come God is such a bummer, right? How come God doesn't allow me to just go? Why can't I go and sleep around, right? Our carnal minds could wander that way, right? Wouldn't it be nice, God, if I can just sleep whenever I want? Well, see, the problem is when you misuse what God creates, there's always consequences. Now remember, we're talking within a Christian context. If I wasn't a Christian, this rule doesn't apply, because the first thing I need to do is to become a Christian. I need to find Christ. I need to know Christ, right? So if I don't know Christ, then I'm living a sinful life anyway. I'm governed by my passions. So the question to the Christian is, how come I just can't go out and sleep around, right? Some of you singles out there, wouldn't it be nice, right? In other words, you choose to live a single life, and I'm not disparaging that in any way. But the idea is that, and later we'll get into some of the reasons why Christians choose to be single. And it's not because they're great missionaries or great evangelists and living out the gospel. Oftentimes it's fear, the trauma of the past. We'll get into that later. But if they can be single, right, and just sleep around. A Christian told me that. I can just, be able to get sex every now and then. And a lot of Christian singles think that way, feel that way. But the reason why God doesn't just allow us to sleep around, explore our sexuality. Remember, all of those exploring of sexuality is outside of Christ. Now I want to read something in Romans chapter 1. And let's see, verse 24. And I'm cutting into this chapter here where Paul begins to indict the sinful man. In other words, he starts off by saying the wrath of God is revealed against ungodliness, unrighteousness of men. So verse 24 says, therefore God delivered them over to cravings of their hearts, to sexual impurity, so that their bodies were degraded among themselves. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worship and serve something created instead of the Creator, who is praised forever. Amen. That is why God delivered them over to degrading passions. For even their females exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. The male, in the same way, also left natural relations with females and were inflamed in their lust from one another. Males committing shameless acts with males and receiving their own persons the appropriate penalty of their error. Now, I'm not going to get off into the homosexual political aspect, here, which I think was a mistake from Christians. Because what Paul is not aiming at just homosexuality engaged right here. What Paul is talking about is the progression of depravity that ungodly people will always fall into. And what he's saying is when you misuse what God created, if you kind of go back to when we started, we talked about God creating Adam and Eve. God allowed Adam to search all the creation, all of the animals, right? And no created animal was suitable as a companion for Adam. And so God created a companion for Adam, the woman, Eve. And in that relationship, in that union, there's no relationship that can be compared to it. There's no fornication cannot compare to that. Now, again, if you're not a Christian, this doesn't apply to you because you can't know that beauty unless you're in Christ. And by the way, I'm not even trying to say that one night stands. Like sometimes we can look at the world and go, man, let's be envious because, man, they can sleep around with different women. They can sleep around with different men. They can sleep around with whatever, right? But are they happy? Are they fulfilling? You know, one of the most interesting things here is that why is it masturbation fulfilling? Because you want something more. See, you want to touch. Now, go back a minute. God created the human body. Remember, God created it. He created the sexual organs, the nerve centers, the pleasures. But he also created the soul, the emotions, the desires. See, that goes along with sexuality as well. One without the other doesn't fit. It's not complete. So again, fornication, remember, is the selfish, self-centered use of a person and place of things for one's own gratification. But there's something missing with that, and that's in the soul region when you connect with a person. The reason why godly sex is so good is because you connect with that person. Now, if I'm an ungodly person, that means I'm selfish. I'm going to use you for my own gratification, whether you're a female, whether you're a male. How about if I really get down to depraved, right? That maybe it's an animal. You want people to have sex with animals, right? Because they're depraved. Why? Because they're gratifying themselves. I'm not saying that everybody who is committing one night stands, certainly they're not out committing bestiality or necrophilia. But my point is that the reason why what's common with all of them is that they're gratifying themselves. Think about this. We have a rash of teachers now, which is boggling my mind because they're 99% gorgeous, pretty teachers who decide that they're going to sleep with their students. Right? Grown women sleeping with 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 13-year-olds. I can't understand that, right? Because what? But they're, again, fornication. They're using the students to gratify themselves. There's something missing. Now, in these cases, we're talking maybe they need salvation. The criminal nevertheless. So you see, fornication cannot fulfill you because what God created was not only the sex act. Because if that were true, then masturbation would fulfill you. And masturbation doesn't. You just want more. Think about this. Watching pornography, right? If you watch pornography and you masturbate, are you fulfilled? No. Because you want to touch. There's something in you. Your body is saying, I want to touch. I want to experience this. I want to know. Remember that word in Genesis when it says, Adam knew his wife. Let me go back there for a moment. I want to read this just to show you. I want to read this right quick. In Genesis chapter 4, and again, it's all in keeping with what God created. And then in the perversion, sin perverted what God created. And so in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, it says, Adam knew his wife, Eve, intimately, and she conceived. Now, notice the word know, because it's more than just physical. Yes, physical is a big part. God created the powerful, strong passion of sex. But what else did he create with that relationship? the emotions, the emotional connect. If you're not emotionally connecting with a person, right? Us men, we know if a woman is just laying there like this, doing your thing, now you're talking about a person who's even more depraved in his mind, right? And there are men like that, by the way. That's why you got some depraved men. How in the world can you have sex with a dead body? Guess what? There's a new trend now called sex robots. And these are just not the old balloon, even though, again, think about it. Some of y'all may remember in the pornography world, it wasn't the pornography world, but you get these balloon dolls. They're just balloons, right? People drew a face on them. But yet there were guys humping the balloons, right? The depravity. So they would hump the balloons and then ejaculate, right? Their own gratification. Well, now you have sex robots. They're soft to the touch. They are lifelike. But the problem is they're not human. So you cannot connect with them emotionally unless you're depraved. Now, there's some guys, they're depraved. But it's the same thing. Now I can use this sex robot for my gratification. The bottom line is this. Anytime you use a person, place, or thing for your own gratification, you're not using what God created. And it can never be fulfilling. There is nothing like what God has created in the relationship. Sin destroyed that. And so now we have to kind of get back on the road to restoring what God had created. And yes, we can get there. But we have to understand why fornication is not the way. Because fornication is the selfish, self-centered use of a person, place, or thing for my own gratification. That's why I said if I go out, I'm a married man. If I go out and cheat on my wife, I am using that woman for my own gratification. If I go out and I go to a pornography movie or whatever, I'm using that as my own gratification. And as I said, something about watching pornography, it makes me want more. When I'm engaged with a passionate relationship with my wife, I may want more of her, but it's fulfilling because that's what God created. I'm not only connecting physically, but emotionally. And I can tell you, I want my wife. I want her touch. I want her to want me. That's what God created. Now we're going to go further with this because we got to find out the trauma. See, the damage that fornication and everything evolved around that, what it did to mankind. And how we can get back to that and get to the godly sex that God had created. I'll see you in the next video. All right.